Welcome to The Explainer. We all think about what it means to be successful. But what if we've been looking at it all wrong? What if true success has less to do with conquering the world and everything to do with conquering yourself? Well, today, we're digging into a really powerful framework from a 1970s address by N. Eldon Tanner that explores that exact idea.
Right out of the gate, the speech hits us with this piece of ancient wisdom from Plato. It's a real challenge to our modern ideas of success, isn't it? It suggests that the biggest, most important battles we'll ever fight aren't out there in the world, they're right inside our own heads.
Okay, so let's really get into this. This is the core idea. The source material basically moves the goalpost for success. It's saying, hey, forget about the stuff you can pile up on the outside for a second. The real game is about the control and the discipline that you can build on the inside.
And this idea is definitely not new. The source shows that it's this kind of golden thread that's been woven through centuries of human wisdom, championed by some of the absolute greatest minds in history.
So we start back with Plato again. For him, conquering yourself wasn't just a victory, it was the victory. The foundational one. The first and most important step that all other meaningful wins come from. Now let's fast forward to the Renaissance. Leonardo da Vinci puts it even more bluntly. He basically creates this scale where the absolute peak of success is measured by how much you master yourself, and the lowest possible failure? Well, that comes from abandoning that self-control. And finally, the source brings in the wisdom of Solomon from the book of Proverbs. Think about this comparison. It's stunning. To rule your own spirit, your temper, your urges, your will, is actually a greater accomplishment than a general conquering an entire city. Just let that sink in.
Okay, so this all sounds great as a philosophy, right? But how does it actually work? What do you do? Well, the source doesn't just leave us hanging. It breaks self-mastery down into two really clear, actionable parts.
The easiest way to think about it is like you're sailing a ship. First, you have to set your course. That's your destination, your values, your moral compass, the standards you decide to live by. But a map is totally useless without an engine, right? That's where apply your willpower comes in. It's the wind in your sails, the actual power that moves you forward.
So when you put those two things together, a clear direction and the willpower to stick with it, what do you get? Well, the source calls this character. It argues that character is really just how well we can direct our self-control towards good things. And it makes the point that when we see true character in someone else, we can't help but admire it.
Now, to describe this whole journey of discipline, the source uses another really powerful metaphor. It talks about following the straight and narrow path, which, of course, immediately brings up some pretty important questions.
Exactly. When you hear the word narrow, it usually sounds negative, right? Like being narrow-minded or having limited options. So doesn't following a super strict path just limit your freedom? It's a fair question, and it's one the source sees coming.
The counterargument here is so interesting. It says that while this path does require you to say no to some things, it's not a prison. In fact, it's the only way to get to real freedom. Think about it. By being disciplined, you gain emancipation from your own bad habits, you get independence from your worst impulses, and you achieve the liberty to actually go after your biggest goals.
And this whole journey, it's not some single heroic leap to the finish line. The source uses this Longfellow poem to make a key point. Discipline is a slow, steady grind that often nobody else sees. It's that toiling upward in the night that leads to lasting success, not some sudden flight of genius.
All right, so to pull all of this out of the world of ideas and into the real world, the source gives us a couple of fantastic little stories that show what this kind of discipline actually looks like in practice. So the first story is about the author's grandson, who was a 16-year-old champion badminton player. And his success wasn't just about raw talent. No way. It was built on a foundation of choices he made every single day. Getting up early to run, balancing hours of practice with school, and sticking to his health goals. It was a conscious, disciplined effort, day in and day out.
The second story is about another grandson and a promise that sounds simple but was actually incredibly profound. He made a commitment to his grandfather to have perfect attendance at his weekly church meetings for years. He called it being a 100%er. Now this timeline really shows what that commitment looked like over the long haul, and believe me, it was not easy. He had to make real sacrifices, like giving up a fun trip to the ocean. At one point, he even faced this huge challenge. He broke his leg, but he still showed up on crutches. This wasn't something that just happened. It took active, consistent choices over a really long time.
And here's the real takeaway.
The author argues that the prize wasn't just the satisfaction of keeping a promise, not at all. The real achievement, the true victory, was the internal foundation of self-discipline that he built over all those years. He forged a habit of self-mastery that was going to serve him for his entire life.
And that brings us right back to that big question that those philosophers were asking centuries ago, and that this text is asking us today. Forget about all the external stuff for just a minute. The ultimate measure of your success might just come down to the answer to one simple question. What dominion do you have over yourself?